China is more than just a country. It is a civilization whose unbroken thread stretches across millennia. The birthplace of the compass, gunpowder, and silk. A land where dynasties rose and fell, yet the culture endured. For centuries, its people have called their land Zhonghua, the Middle Kingdom, the center of the universe, where the emperor, invested with the mandate of heaven, ruled everything under the sky. To be Chinese was to believe you stood at the very heart of civilization, and everyone else lived on the barbarous edges. By the mid-19th century, the Manchu Qing dynasty had sat on the dragon throne for 200 years. The empire seemed unshakable. 400 million subjects, roughly a third of the world's wealth. From the frozen steppes of Mongolia to the tropical coasts of the South China Sea, one throne commanded it all. But beneath the gilded surface, this giant stood on feet of clay. Blinded by its own greatness, the Qing court rejected change. While Europe went through the Industrial Revolution, building factories, railways, and modern armies, China remained locked in the medieval age. The Mandarins spent their days memorizing Confucian classics, written 1,000 years earlier. Meanwhile, foreign powers circled like sharks. The collapse began with the White Death. British merchants had found the perfect key to Chinese silver, Indian opium. By the 1830s, millions of Chinese were addicted. Silver poured out of the empire's coffers and into British pockets. When the Qing court finally tried to shut down this poisonous trade, the British Empire responded with war. The First Opium War of 1839 was a massacre. Chinese war junks with medieval cannons faced British ironclads armed with explosive shells. Coastal forts that had stood for centuries were reduced to rubble in minutes. The Treaty of Nanking in 1842 was a national humiliation. Hong Kong, ceded to Britain in perpetuity. 5 treaty ports forced open, and China had to pay reparations for daring to resist its own destruction. Chinese sovereignty was trampled, but external weakness sparked internal explosion. In 1850, a failed civil service exam candidate named Hong Xiuquan declared himself the younger brother of Jesus Christ and launched the Taiping Rebellion. For 14 years, southern China burned. Entire cities were leveled. The death toll? Estimates range from 20 to 40 million people. It remains the bloodiest civil war in human history. The Qing survived barely, but the empire was bleeding from 1,000 cuts. In 1895, even Japan, the younger brother that China had once taught everything, defeated the imperial fleet in the Sino-Japanese War. China lost Taiwan, lost Korea, and lost any remaining claim to great power status. The myth of Qing invincibility was shattered forever. At the turn of the century, popular rage exploded into the Yihechuan movement. The boxers, peasant martial artists who believed magic spells would make them bulletproof. They believed foreign railways and telegraphs angered the spirits of the land. So they burned churches, murdered missionaries, and tore up rail lines. And the aging Empress Dowager Cixi made the fatal mistake of betting on them. In June 1900, she declared war on 8 foreign powers at once. It was political suicide. An international coalition, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Japan, the United States, Italy, and Austria-Hungary, stormed Beijing. The Forbidden City was looted. Priceless artifacts were carried off to museums in London and Paris. The Qing court fled in disguise, like common refugees. And when the smoke cleared, China was forced to pay an indemnity so massive it would take 40 years to repay. The dynasty was now a walking corpse. Desperate to survive, Cixi launched belated reforms. A new army was created, trained along Western lines. The ancient civil service exams, which had been the backbone of imperial power for over 1,000 years, were abolished. But it was too late. The clock had run out. Among intellectuals, a new voice emerged. Dr. Sun Yat-sen, a physician educated in Hawaii and Hong Kong. He had seen a modern world, and he knew China's only hope was revolution. His vision? Overthrow the Manchus, establish a republic, modernize the nation through his 3 principles of the people: nationalism, democracy, and people's livelihood. On October 10, 1911, an accidental explosion in an underground bomb workshop in Wuchang exposed a revolutionary network. Panicked, the local garrison mutinied. Within weeks, the domino effect swept across southern China. Province after province declared independence from Beijing. On January 1, 1912, the Republic of China was proclaimed in Nanjing. Sun Yat-sen stood before a crowd and declared the birth of Asia's first republic. The streets erupted in celebration. Men cut off their queues, the humiliating Manchu braid that every Han Chinese man had been forced to wear for 200 years. It was a symbolic death of the old world. But Sun Yat-sen faced a problem. The new republic controlled the south, but the north, with its powerful Beiyang army, remained loyal to the Qing. To avoid a devastating civil war, Sun made a Faustian bargain. He offered the presidency to General Yuan Shikai, the strongman who controlled the North's military machine, in exchange for one thing: the abdication of the emperor. On February 12, 1912, the last emperor, 6-year-old Puyi, was forced to sign the abdication decree. 2,000 years of imperial rule ended with the stroke of a child's brush. The age of emperors was over. But the age of democracy? It never truly began. In 1913, Song Jiren, the brilliant young leader of Sun's Nationalist Party and the great hope for parliamentary government, was gunned down at a Shanghai train station. Yuan Shikai was widely believed to be behind the assassination. With his main rival dead, Yuan dissolved parliament and crowned himself dictator. Yuan Shikai's ambitions knew no bounds. In December 1915, he declared himself emperor of a new dynasty. The entire nation exploded in fury. Even his own generals abandoned him. Humiliated and broken, Yuan canceled the monarchy after just 83 days. He died a few months later in June 1916, a broken man. And with his death, the center could not hold. China descended into chaos. The warlord era had begun. Dozens of military strongmen carved the provinces into personal kingdoms. In the north, the old marshal, Zhang Zuolin, ruled Manchuria like a feudal lord, collecting taxes and running opium dens. In central China, rival cliques, the Zhili, the Anhui, the Fengtian, fought endless wars over control of Beijing. Whoever held the capital could claim to be the legitimate government of China, even if that government controlled nothing beyond the city walls. For ordinary people, it was hell. Peasants were taxed 50 years in advance. Banditry was rampant. Soldiers looted and raped with impunity. It seemed China might simply disintegrate, vanish from the map like the Mongol Empire or the Ottomans. But humiliation sparked a new wave of nationalism. In 1919, at the Versailles Peace Conference, China, officially one of the victors of World War I, hoped to reclaim the German colonial holdings in Shandong province. Instead, the Western powers cynically handed those territories to Japan. The betrayal was complete. On May 4, 1919, thousands of students poured into the streets of Beijing. They stormed the homes of pro-Japanese officials and set them ablaze. The May 4th movement became a cultural revolution. Young intellectuals rejected Confucianism as backward superstition. They demanded science, democracy, and national renewal. The movement electrified China's youth. And some of those youth began looking to a new ideology: Marxism. In July 1921, in a rented house in Shanghai's French Concession, 13 men gathered in secret. They founded the Communist Party of China. One of them was a 27-year-old librarian's assistant from Hunan named Mao Zedong. No one paid much attention. At the time, the party had fewer than 60 members. In the South, Sun Yat-sen was trying to build a base for national reunification. But the Western powers ignored him. The Soviet Union, however, saw an opportunity. Moscow sent advisors, weapons, and money. In return, they demanded that Sun's nationalist party, the Kuomintang, form a united front with the tiny Communist Party. Sun agreed. The first united front was born. Together, nationalists and communists built a revolutionary army. The Whampoa Military Academy became the forge of a new officer corps. Its commandant was a tough, disciplined soldier named Chiang Kai-shek. In March 1925, Sun Yat-sen died of cancer. His last words were, "The revolution is not yet complete." Chiang Kai-shek seized control of the Guomindang, and in July 1926, he launched the Northern Expedition. The goal? March north and crush the warlords. Unite China by force. And it worked. The National Revolutionary Army rolled north like a tidal wave. Warlord armies, riddled with corruption and low morale, collapsed or defected. By early 1927, the revolutionaries controlled half of China. Victory seemed within reach. But beneath the surface, the alliance was fracturing. In Shanghai, communist organizers had mobilized tens of thousands of workers. They staged armed uprisings and seized control of the city, handing it to Chiang on a silver platter. But their success terrified the business elite and the conservative wing of the Guomindang. Chiang Kai-shek faced a choice: share power with the communists or destroy them. On April 12, 1927, Chiang made his move. In the early morning, nationalist troops and hired gangsters from the Green Gang launched coordinated raids across Shanghai. Thousands of communists and labor organizers were arrested. Many were executed on the spot, shot in the streets, or beheaded in public squares. The massacre spread to other cities. The United Front was dead. The Chinese Civil War had begun. By 1928, Chiang Kai-shek had captured Beijing and formally unified China under the nationalist flag. The Nanjing Decade began. For a brief moment, it seemed China might finally stabilize. Modern infrastructure was built. Universities expanded. A new legal code was drafted. But the peace was an illusion. In the mountains of Jiangxi, communist survivors were regrouping. And to the north, a new enemy was sharpening its claws. In September 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria. Using a staged explosion on a railway line as a pretext, the Japanese army overran the region in weeks. The puppet state of Manchukuo was established, with the last Qing Emperor Puyi installed as a figurehead. Chiang Kai-shek refused to fight Japan. Instead, he poured every resource into hunting down the communists. "The Japanese are a disease of the skin," he said. "The communists are a disease of the heart." By 1934, Chiang's forces had surrounded the communist base in Jiangxi. Facing annihilation, the communists broke through the encirclement and began a desperate retreat. The Long March, a trek of over 6,000 miles across some of the most brutal terrain on Earth. Mountains, marshes, deserts, pursued by nationalist troops and hostile warlords. Of the 86,000 who set out, fewer than 8,000 reached the caves of Yan'an in Shaanxi province a year later. But those who survived were forged into steel. And in those caves, Mao Zedong solidified his control over the party. The Long March became the founding myth of the Communist Party. In December 1936, everything changed. Two nationalist generals kidnapped Chiang Kai-shek in the city of Xi'an. They refused to release him until he agreed to stop fighting the communists and form a second united front against Japan. Chiang had no choice. He agreed. In July 1937, Japan launched a full-scale invasion. Beijing fell. Shanghai was bombed into rubble after 3 months of brutal urban combat. And in December 1937, the nationalist capital of Nanjing fell. What followed was one of the worst atrocities of the 20th century, the rape of Nanjing. For 6 weeks, Japanese soldiers murdered, raped, and looted without restraint. Estimates of the death toll range from 200,000 to 300,000. But China did not surrender. The nationalists retreated inland to Chongqing, a mountain city on the Yangtze River. For 8 years, China fought on. The Guomindang bore the brunt of conventional battles, bleeding its best divisions white. Meanwhile, the communists waged guerrilla war in the countryside, winning peasant support through land reform and brutal efficiency. In August 1945, Japan surrendered. But peace did not come to China. Negotiations between the nationalists and communists collapsed. Civil war erupted with renewed fury. This time, the communists had the advantage. Chiang's regime was rotting from within. Corruption was rampant. Hyperinflation destroyed the economy. Soldiers deserted in droves. Meanwhile, the People's Liberation Army swept south, capturing city after city. In April 1949, they crossed the Yangtze and took Nanjing. The war was over. Chiang Kai-shek fled to the island of Taiwan with the remnants of his government and 2 million refugees. To this day, both sides claim to be the legitimate government of China. On October 1st, 1949, in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, Mao Zedong stood atop the gate of heavenly peace. Before a crowd of hundreds of thousands, he declared, "The Chinese people have stood up." The People's Republic of China was born. After a century of humiliation, invasion, and civil war, China was once again united. But the cost had been staggering. Tens of millions dead, entire cities reduced to rubble, an economy in ruins. Yet from that devastation, a new superpower would rise. The China we know today, a global giant with the second largest economy on Earth, was forged in the fires of those terrible years. The fall of the Qing, the warlords, the Long March, the war with Japan, the communist victory. This is the story every Chinese person learns. It is the foundation of modern Chinese identity, a reminder of what happens when the nation is weak, and a vow that China will never be weak again. History has come full circle. The Middle Kingdom has returned.